The most popular games in 2025 were AA and indie games, although a couple of years ago we could not even imagine this. Until recently, the entire market belonged to giants like Ubisoft, Rockstar Games, and so on, but now indie games are taking over the market and large companies are in a panic from such news. Games made by a group of enthusiasts, or even one person, are starting to take the attention of millions. Today, I will tell you why indie games have become so popular, what will happen next, and why are large publishers so afraid, and you share your opinion in the comments. Let's go back 10 years, the 2010s. This was the real heyday of AAA. Every year we received huge releases: Skyrim, The Witcher 3, GTA 5, Red Dead Redemption 2. These games looked like movie blockbusters. Huge worlds, photorealistic graphics, thousands of employees in the studio, marketing campaigns comparable to Hollywood. AAA games seemed eternal. No one even doubted. Here they are, the industry leaders, and they will rule forever. Players are used to the fact that a real game is scale, graphics, brand. If a new Call of Duty comes out, it's an event. If a new Assassin's Creed comes out, all the media writes about it. And in this picture of the world, indies looked like a nice addition. Something small, experimental for the evening. Yes, there were successes like Minecraft, but this was perceived more as an exception to the rule. But you know what the problem with any illusion of stability is? It always cracks at the seams. Let's move closer to our days. In recent years, something has gone wrong. It would seem that budgets were growing, studios were spending hundreds of millions on development, but the result was disappointing. Remember the launch of Cyberpunk 2077? It was one of the most anticipated releases of the decade, millions of pre-orders, crazy hype, and what did players get at the start? Glitches, bugs, unplayable console versions. The internet was filled with memes, and instead of triumph, there was a huge scandal. Or take Ubisoft. Each new part of Assassin's Creed, Far Cry, or Watch Dogs became more and more similar to each other. The formula: mark points on the map, complete quests according to the template, pump up the characters, cease to surprise. Yes, AAA still looked beautiful, but the soul left them. And against this background, strange small games began to emerge that suddenly became viral. Hollow Knight. 3 people made a game that gathered millions of fans. Stardew Valley. One developer created a farm that grew into a whole cultural phenomenon. Players went there for hundreds of hours. Among Us. A minimalist game about the mafia, which became a worldwide hit 2 years after its release. Players started asking themselves, why does a game from 1 or 2 people cause more emotions than a blockbuster with a budget of hundreds of millions? But why exactly is this happening? Why do players stop trusting giants and go to small projects? What has changed in the industry that made indie games a real threat to AAA? When we talk about AAA, the first thing that comes to mind is budgets, hundreds of millions of dollars, thousands of employees, huge offices. It would seem, how can you lose with such a resource? But here's the paradox. The more money in the project, the higher the risk. The higher the risk, the less room for experimentation. Imagine you invest $200 million in a game, you have shareholders, investors, reports. Can you afford to take a risk and do something unusual? Of course not. You are obliged to follow a proven formula that guarantees sales. This is why AAA games are increasingly similar to each other. We get dozens of copies with minimal differences. Yes, it is beautiful. Yes, it is expensive. But the feeling of déjà vu is getting stronger. Now let's look at indies. They don't have huge budgets. They don't have shareholder pressure. They only have an idea. And it's the idea that becomes the main weapon. Remember Undertale, one man Toby Fox. Music, script, gameplay, he did it all himself. The game didn't have AAA graphics, but it had what corporations lacked: soul. And here we are, faced with the main question. What is more important, money or ideas? AAA shows that money without ideas is emptiness. Indies prove that ideas without money can still change the world. Indie games have become bold. Where AAA were afraid to take risks, small studios experimented. Schedule 2, a game with very simple graphics but with interesting mechanics of creating drugs. How many games have you seen that can offer such gameplay? Doki Doki Literature Club, disguised as a cute visual novel which turns into a psychological horror. Such a project is impossible in AAA because it is too risky. Indie is freedom, and it is freedom that gives birth to real discoveries. And here the question arises, can the industry live without experiments? If AAA is afraid and indies take risks, who is really driving progress? Sometimes small studios grow into giants. Look at Larian Studios. Until recently, they could be called almost indie, but in 2023, they released Baldur's Gate 3, and the game was not just successful, it won Game of the Year. A huge project made with love and respect for the player, and now we come to the most interesting part. AAA has become fearful. Alarming notes appear in investor reports. Sales are falling, players are leaving for small projects, trust is declining, shares of large companies are sagging after unsuccessful releases. And now we are on the verge of change. AAA still exists, they still have money, brands, marketing, but players are leaving. And along with the players, the future is leaving. It turns out that players have turned away from corporations and followed sincerity. But why exactly now has this turning point become irreversible? The reason is simple and at the same time painfully complex. AAA stopped making games for players and started making them for investors. Indie for the sake of the idea. Big corporations are mired in endless reports, market research, and fear of losing money. Every decision they make goes through the filters of will it pay off, will investors like it? How will it affect the stock? Indie developers start from other questions. Will it be fun? Will we be able to make something new? Will players like it as much as we do? Now let's look ahead. What awaits us next? The trend is obvious. Mid-sized studios and independent teams will become increasingly important. Players trust them. They expect freshness, courage, and creativity from them, and these expectations are met. However, the giants will not disappear. They have too much money, brands, and resources. But they will have to change. Perhaps they will start breaking up into more flexible units. Perhaps they will start buying indie studios and giving them more freedom. AAA lost not because they have little money, but because they have no soul. And indies win because they make games out of love, just like AAA studios used to do. Big companies are afraid because for the first time in decades, money is no longer the main weapon. Players choose not brands, but emotions, not graphics, but sincerity, not marketing, but ideas, and you know there is something beautiful about this. Because it means the future of the gaming industry does not belong to corporations, but to people, to players like you and me,